Gonna get free this time. Falling into a blue sky mind.
Well, hello. Welcome
Came to
back
me and
to
that's
You,
all my
Me, and
friend.
the Elephant with Deb Air. And
Crystal clear, baby.
so, what if when you forget, you're remembering something else? It's interesting because some things that come in that we talk about feel confusing for me at first, yet it's like coming to me because it wants to be unpacked, it wants to be looked at and felt. And so this kind of started with that. We all forget things. We forget basic things. If you're an active parent, you forget your kid's lunch, or I've been giving talks for years, and sometimes I'd be like right in the middle of my talk and I would go blank. Has anybody ever done that? Like in a conversation, we go through the freeze where all of a sudden you forget literally, there's no words in there. Your brain just was an open, clear canvas,
That's right.
which actually kind of brings me to that place of when we do forget, when it does go blank for a moment, or we forget the simplest things like your kid's lunch or where are my keys? We do it every single day. We are often moving quite fast. There's a reason why our brain forgets. I don't know about you, but when I feel like I've had a lot on my plate and I maybe have not gotten the amount of sleep that I desire, and I start making less smart choices, I start forgetting easier everything, forgetting where is my head. You just start forgetting those things. Lack of sleep, stress in general, it narrows our focus. And yet at the same time, the way that we live our life, there is a whole shit ton of things to try to remember. So we write lists, we have our calendars, we have alarms that are going off. And we have all these things externally to try to have us remember the things that we're supposed to do. While in tandem, we forget more when we are more tired, when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel like we can't either catch a breath or catch a break. And so you have to start to look at those things when they're moving in tandem. It's like, well, okay, if I'm forgetting more and I'm also just stressed out more, there must be a correlation. And going to the basics, think about it as slow brain and fast brain. Slow thinking, fast thinking. And so fast brain is often on high in our everydays just by nature of how we live. And our fast brain allows us to make what? Quick decisions. It's not rocket science there, but it is also our lower part of our brain, what we call the reptilian part of our brain. It is in there because it can save our life. And so if you're driving down the street, a car swerves, boom, like I do not want to use my slow brain. I don't want to say, maybe that person is stressed out. I'm going to invite them over for tea. I'm going to like, hey, peace out, because I'll be dead. They've crashed into my car because I haven't used the proper brain of survival, of fast brain to get the heck out of the way. And they're probably very in their fast brain because they're not even seeing, right? And this is the whole point. When we're in our fast brain too much, we lose. You see the horses, like Clydesdale horses, and they've got the blinders on the sides of them. Okay, so the more our fast brain is over utilizing itself, overstepping its boundaries because we're in more of the survival, the more the blinders are there. And so the point is that when we have the fast brain and the blinders are there, we don't see or remember a lot of what is important for us to remember. If you're feeling forgetful and you're going, oh my God, I just like, is there something wrong with my brain? I need to get a CAT scan. For me, going through menopause, I am forgetting a lot of different things that used to come more natural. And this is how I think this came about, that I'm also realizing going through this stage of my life that I am slower in a more powerful way, where I am more receptive to not having my identity so wrapped up in all the doing of what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm more of in a receiving mode of receiving life and really being able to go into my slower brain and really feel into what do I care about? What's important to me? What really lights, what's alive in me? And the slower brain, when I feel forgetful, oh my God, I cannot, I'll walk, we've all done this. Well, I'm going to say that we all have because it'll make me feel better. Like I'm in one room and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go get that thing in the other room. And by the time in that room, I'm like, why am I here?
I'm
That
raising
is
my
just like,
hand. I'm
okay,
with
thank
you. I'm
God.
with you, Sister Goddess.
Right?
It's me.
We live a life where we can't move from one room in our house to another where we freaking remember why we even moved 10 steps. And I believe it's our natural instinct. And let's say the slow brain going, the power that is life, tapping us and being like, wait. And
Mhm.
that a lot of times as we're forgetting, it's like the thing we're forgetting is parts of ourselves. Because when the blinders come on, we can't see and feel in the depths within ourselves and what's around us. So we stub our toe more, we trip on things, we drop things. I cannot tell you how many times like I spilled green drink, my nice healthy green drink on my white shirts, all in my car. If I told you some of the things, it would scare you because you'd be like, you should not be on the road. My point is when forgetting, we're forgetting ourselves. We're forgetting to be able to activate our slow brain, which gives us this incredible thing, which only humans have this ability to download more complex files, to see more, to have reasoning, to be able to connect with something beyond ourself. And this goes further than just the brain, but like, what do we do when we forget? What's the first thing we usually do? We forget something, especially if you're a good person.
Totally. Well, one, when I forget something, I try super hard to remember it. So now I'm focusing.
Yeah.
Like, do it, do
Closing
it,
the
do it.
blinders
And then
even
if
more.
it doesn't happen, I'm going to beat myself up about it. I'm be like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? That's what I was doing.
Totally. Totally. And I mean, I've beat myself up so much about forgetting. And I've just really had at different phases of my life, and this one in particular, I've had to really sit with it and feel it. And actually the whole reason of this episode is because of some of the sitting with it that I've been doing, because there's been a lot of self-judgment. The bottom line is that the way that we live our life, the way that we forget things, or I think when we forget, it is the sign of the universe going, wait, wait, remember, remember, remember over here. Because if we are wrapped up, and you said something so important, is that, and I used to do this when I was, giving a talk. I'd be like, oh my God, you get that contraction. You're like, I got to remember it. And you're literally choking out. Those blinders are now literally over your eyes, not on the
That's right.
sides of your eyes.
That's
And you
right.
can't breathe. And you're trying so hard to remember the thing. And it keeps getting further and further and further away, because you're getting further and further away from yourself, from your ability to see and feel more in the moment. Where does forgetting um, intersect with trusting ourselves? Where does forgetting intersect with what's most important in our life? We are, and we could do a whole episode on this, we are literally groomed not to trust our bodies
Yes.
and not to value our bodies and to judge our bodies in ourselves. So when we forget, we have a lot of value about doing, especially in American culture, of doing things right, of being independent, of being an achiever. So when we forget, we're going literally opposite direction of being good and achieving, and therefore ultimately being a good person. And because we have this fast brain override, It's hard in the moment when we forget to check in with what really matters and to check in. Trust this moment. Trust that the forgetting that you have has a reason. And
Trust that
what
it's
might,
okay to take the blinders off.
yeah, yeah. And let yourself forget the thing and see what else your body and your life want to remember. When I keep forgetting, what my body is telling me is like, it's telling me to remember I'm tired, to cut myself a freaking break, to maybe slip into the hot tub or take a warm shower or go for a walk. Like, it's telling me to remember some aspect of me that actually, funny enough, is the very part of me that will remember the other thing
That's
that
true.
I forgot.
That's true. That's true. We were joking before we started hit record on this, but I can't help but to think of it so strongly now is that I always learn something from our conversations. I brag. I always learn something. And I am legit going to start when I have that forgetful moment. I'm going to pause and say, I just love you. I just love you, forgetful brain. I love you, beautiful self. What do you need to tell me right now? Instead of my knee jerk reaction of like, what the F was that I was supposed to be doing right now? I'm gonna have a little love moment because of
Mm.
this conversation right here. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are we wanting to remember?
Yeah.
And is forgetting something giving us the moment? It's saying, wait, not now. Remember this.
Mm,
Remember this part of me. So there's so much pressure. I said, there's so much overlap. I often say this to people coming in for care for the first time, or I'm doing a progress exam, and we use very not just holistic, but very layered ways of how we look at the human body. We look at that, the progress and what changes people are making. And I often say when we try to just take something apart, if we're just looking at our physical body or just looking at our emotions, just looking at our mental thought process, it's like trying to separate all those things. We can certainly observe them separately for a moment, but trying to go, okay, this is this one thing that you're dealing with is like baking a cookie. And then after you've baked the cookie, you try to extract the egg. We are orchestras of things in our bodies, in our culture, from what things are influencing us are often unconscious to us because we were just raised certain ways. We live every day immersed in certain stories and we're constantly being bombarded. And I believe forgetting that bombardment, forgetting all those things that we're supposed to do can be an absolute godsend back home to self and saying, what do you need to remember about yourself? What can you remember that you're losing because you're always trying to remember all these other things? Maybe the forgetfulness is really a doorway back to self and what really matters. To go back to giving a talk when I would go blank, what happened as I started to trust myself more, as I started to say, I'm enough, and I am trusting that my interface between myself and the space of these people is going to inform me exactly what I need. What would happen is if someone asked me a question, or I literally be in a flow of thought and it would just stop like steel door. And that gives you a little panic at first. You're like, all these people are looking at me and I don't know what I'm saying. I would pause. I would pause and just be quiet, literally stop talking. And what I found is I was losing a part of myself because I was trying so hard, like you said, to try to remember the thing you forget. I was trying so hard to give a point or do the thing. And the forgetful moment was telling me, stop for a minute. And I'm not kidding. It became a way of teaching where it started where I would just stop talking and I would breathe and I would let the slow brain come in and I would just let myself trust the moment instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm a complete failure. What do I do now? And I'm not kidding. It became a pattern, almost like a boomerang. If I threw that out and it would come back, and all of a sudden that train of thought would come right back in. It was magical. There were times where it also taught me how to speak up differently. Funny enough, if a student asked me something and if I didn't have the answer right away, but I could kind of feel it coming, I'd be like, it's a great question. Give me a moment. And I would just pause. I like started to verbalize. I did this as being a business owner. I used to have this experience of employees going, okay, what do you want to do? You're the one, you got to make the decision. It was kind of the same thing as forgetting. I think just giving ourselves some slack and getting to know ourselves and how we process life, these answers are going to come overnight. This is the journey of living. How does your energy run? Some people, they get a question asked and their behavior is to answer it right away. And for me, I need to pause for a minute and I need to process because I don't always have the answers at my fingertips. So I think there's really something beautiful here to save the energy of beating yourself up when you forget things. And it could be forgetting someone's birthday. There's things that sting more than others that have more weight. But again, if you can ask yourself, what is it, body? What is it, like you just said, Crystal, this love moment? What are you wanting to remember? And just let yourself feel that for a moment because there's always something to remember that's different than what we forgot.
Hmm.
And again, I want to be mindful to, I've heard so many people, especially my age and older, and really talk about the fear around forgetting and not being able to use their cognition in the way that they wish to. And that it's this scary unknown thing because we all know, most of us have known somebody who has had some form of dementia or has had Alzheimer's, and it's a very scary thing and it's a very sad thing to witness. So for all of you that have, or maybe you do have signs of that yourself, we're sending massive compassion. We talk about rewriting and flipping the script. How can you use forgetfulness as, yeah, as another doorway back to self of what really matters? And I know we've said that several times in this episode. It's worth repeating because there's so much pressure that we have within ourselves to remember a ton of things. And I think that the forgetting these things that we end up trying so hard to remember, it is pushing us further and further away of what our body, what our being is saying. Can you be with me? Can you remember more of this? And what's crazy is sometimes those things that you're trying to remember that you forgot aren't even important. You actually go, wait a minute, no wonder I forgot it. You know, the saying that it's when you forget, and what do we say? We'll say, well, if it's important, it'll come back.
Mhm.
You know what? Sometimes there's been important things and they don't come back. And then I'm like, oh, that was the thing I forgot.
That's right.
So, what is it telling you about your life and what things you commit to and what things you avoid and what things you just say yes to and what things you're not saying no to? It's just an exploration. We don't have the answer of what to do other than what Crystal just said, the inspiration of saying, instead of going to the knee-jerk response of forgetting and beating yourself up, can you just see what places in you want to be remembered in that moment?
There could be a whole nother trajectory that you go on. It makes me think of my grandmother when she would forget something. She would sit there for a second, but then she'd say, well, it must have been a lie. And as a joke, but what was
Yeah, no, I
funny
remember
about
saying that as
that
kids.
is that instead of her trying to like go down this path of remembering, she made light of it. And then we ended up having a whole different moment. So
Mm-hmm.
it is in the vein of what we're saying is that I feel she was unconsciously doing exactly what we're speaking to now. She forgot something, she had compassion for herself, she made a little joke, and then we went on and ended up talking about something else or doing
Mm-hmm.
something else that must have been more important or just what that moment was calling for
Mhm.
versus whatever path we were going on. And the
Yeah.
forgetful stop sign came up, and
Yeah.
we decided to turn left instead.
We used to say that when we were kids. It must have been a lie. And that just kind of landed. Yeah, maybe it was a lie, meaning it's not all of what's important right now. What conversations or what moments are we not having? Because I guess what came in also is aging and feeling how I use my brain and how I remember things is very different. A lot of times we look at the elderly as like, oh, they're forgetting. I think that they're starting to remember more sort of dimensionally what life is.
Hmm.
And I think it's what I'm feeling is if the sort of veil of the timing of life and the ways that we use time in our everyday culture, it's all of this detail, lower brain, do. For me, what I'm feeling is that this other part is growing, which actually it's proportional to forgetting some of these details that it's like, am I wasting my time on all of these details? Does this have to be like this? Does that have to be like that? That there really is this thing that we can tap into no matter what age we are that just says, let's just see every time I forget, what if it was a lie? And just in the fun way, right?
That's
It's just
right.
that it's not the whole truth, that there's a part that's just saying, wait, what else might be important right now?
That's right.
Um, when I rest, will I wake up? When I really rest, will I wake up and will I remember what I need to remember that really matters? I love that story about your grandmother. And it's a great time. Like, look at the elderly sort of population and see that their time and space is suspending in a way that there's a lot of wisdom in that because they are not as much of a prisoner to the everyday schedule and details of the achieving doing society. So I think there's a lot to have compassion for, but also learn from in that.
Absolutely.
Until then, I hope you forget so that you can remember. We look forward to talking to you next time. And as always, let us know what your takeaways are, or questions, or things you want us to bring up on this podcast. We are grateful for each and every one of you, and share.
Bye.
Bye bye. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.